everyone. Welcome back to the Official Visit podcast. We got a little bit of a special one today. A lot of news this week about new Oregon quarterback Dakota Prukop deciding that he's going to transfer over to Oregon. He spurned Alabama and Nick Saban. I'm Tyson Alger. I am joined here by Andrew Greif, and on the phone we have Colter Nuanez, who has been covering Montana State for probably the last 5 or 6 years. He is now with it's Skyline Sports now, correct? Right, Colter?
Yeah, you got it. Skyline Sports. Yeah, I've been covering the Bobcats since 2011, covering the whole Big Sky here with this new project since the beginning of this football season. So yeah, been around the Big Sky for a long time now.
So a little bit of your history. You went to the University of Montana. That's where I first met you. You were with the Bozeman Daily Chronicle for a bit, and then you kind of went on your independent way. Did some stuff for Bobcat Nation, and now it's kind of a new project. You guys are. It's you and your brother doing this, correct?
Yeah. My brother and I, we have a couple of freelancers that work for us kind of sporadically throughout the season, and just covering mainly Montana State, but the rest of the Big Sky as well, ranking teachers about the rest of the schools, and trying to give kind of a platform for the whole league. Just from mainly a feature writing perspective, we covered the beats of the two Montana schools pretty heavily, but then outside of the Montana schools, we try to just do feature stuff and keep people in the news and all that. But yeah, it's been going well. It's a fun project. So yeah, SkylineSportsNT.com. That's what I want to say.
So, okay, what's the mood in Bozeman right now?
I think that the mood in Bozeman right now is heavily optimistic because the frustrations that have kind of culminated in the deterioration of the Montana State program have kind of all gotten wiped clean, not only with Rob Ash and his staff being fired less than 48 hours after losing to the Grizzlies in their big rivalry game, but also then people were delaying wait to see what was going to happen with the Prukop situation, and I think there's some people that are a little bit disappointed, but I think by and large people are a little bit actually happy for the kid who's getting a great opportunity, as well as it frees you up a lot more when you have a new coaching staff. I mean, Prukop, he's a very special player, but you have to put him in the right system. And the coach that they hired here, Jeff Choate, he's got some Boise State and Washington ties. But I think he's going to want to go a little bit more traditional, a little bit more pro style offensively. But I think this gives them a lot more freedom in terms of that. And I think that has really bred some optimism around here because I think people kind of understand that. They understand that you are losing a great player, but it is only going to be for 1 year, and it's a completely fresh start for the program now, from the coaching staff on down to the quarterback.
All right, hey Colter, it's Andrew. One of the things that I think a lot of people look at is the offense he was running at Montana State and how it's, some people think it's going to be seamless to what he might be running in Oregon. Obviously, nothing is ever that seamless or that perfect, but kind of what was he does seem to have a lot of the skill sets necessary for something like that. What kind of jumps out to you when you think about Prukop running the spread offense? What was he most gifted at?
I would say his best. He is a fantastic athlete. He's an FBS level athlete, and that's why he was able to have so much success just on a purely individual basis in the FCS. I think his athletic talents outweighed him a little bit and got in his way sometimes because he tried to do too much, especially because Montana State's talent around him these last 2 years hasn't been what it was when Montana State won 3 straight titles at the beginning of the decade. But I would say beyond his athleticism, though, his best skill is his decision-making ability. He's a very, very smart kid, as evidenced by getting an economics degree from a pretty good school in 3.5 years. And Montana State, these last couple of years, especially when he has been healthy, they're basically running the spread triple option that's somewhat similar to Oregon, but they're giving him 4 different decisions to make on every play. He can take the ball, he can give to the running back, he can keep himself, he can run a pass play, basically a run-pass option. But then the 4th option in that is if he gets through his reads, his number one order from the offensive coordinator basically was, if you get through your reads as fast as you possibly can, take off running because you're the best athlete on the field. And you saw that in him rushing for nearly 2,000 yards in his career here, but you also saw him get banged up a lot because of that. But long story short, to answer your question, I think that his best skill is his ability to make decisions quickly. And like you said, it won't be a completely seamless transition. It never is. But he has such a good head on his shoulders. He is such a hard worker, and he has so much aptitude mentally. I think he'll be just fine. I think given the amount of time he has to learn that offense, I think he'll fit in seamlessly by the time fall camp.
Did people kind of assume that with Vernon Adams, I think it was pretty obvious after about a season that this kid has FBS ability, and maybe it was an oversight or somebody had overlooked him. With Prukop, I mean, was it like that from the start? I mean, obviously you got to see Adams play at the FCS level. Can you kind of compare the two talent wise?
Well, they're much different players. I think that there always has been a misperception of Vernon Adams as a running quarterback. He's a very good runner, and he can extend plays with his feet, but he's not necessarily a running quarterback, if that makes sense. Dakota is the antithesis of a running quarterback. He's exactly what a running quarterback is. He's very good in the zone read game. He makes the correct reads very often. His durability is his one knock in that aspect of the game. But talent-wise, they're much different. Dakota's much more athletic, pure athleticism in terms of his ability to cut, accelerate, his pure speed. Vernon is so much more crafty and savvy and probably a lot more clutch. And Vernon has the way of making the wow play so often that you guys saw throughout the year, especially after he got the offense down there at Oregon. He can extend plays, and he has such a good ability to keep plays alive and keep his eyes down the field and really hit big plays like that. Dakota's a little bit different than that just because he'll take off running a lot more just because he is so dynamic in the open field. But like you said, Vernon Adams came out and threw 55 touchdowns his sophomore year and was the runner-up for the Walter Payton Award and led Eastern Washington in the semifinals. And at that point, everybody knew, wow, this kid, the only knock he pretty much has is that he's 5'11" or 6 feet tall. Besides that, he looks like a big league player. He was ripping it up against the Pac-12, all those sorts of things. Dakota, the progression has been much different. He had a pretty interesting recruiting story because in high school they redrew the district lines in Austin, Texas, and he had to go to a brand new high school, and so when he went to that high school, he was kind of the best athlete on the team, and he was getting a lot of Big 12 interest from schools like Texas A&M, Texas Tech to play defense. But then when he goes to this new high school, they basically put him. They said, "Hey, you're our best athlete. We want craft and offense around you." So he's pretty young to the position, and he only played quarterback for 2 years in high school. And the only offer he had out of high school to play offense was at Montana State. So it wasn't apparent that he was going to be a phenom like Vernon. When he came to Montana State, his athleticism was undeniable. He was one of the top 5 fastest guys on the team. The moment he stepped on campus, his work ethic was undeniable as well. But in terms of quarterbacking skills and his mechanics and all that kind of stuff, he was super, super raw. He wasn't ready to play at all. And, I'm sure we'll get into this just kind of his career here, but a testament to Dakota is he improved himself so much. The jump he made from his redshirt freshman year to his redshirt sophomore year to win the starting job here at Montana State was tremendous. And then the jump he made this last offseason, just in terms of being a pure passer, that was another tremendous jump too. If he can make that same sort of jump a third straight offseason, which I don't know why he wouldn't, it'll be pretty special. And he has put in the work to do this, and he has this supporting cast around him too that makes this kind of accelerate as well. And he trains with George Whitfield in the offseason, so all those factors has caused him to accelerate quickly. But in terms of comparing their talent, Dakota is more of a late bloomer, but he's definitely worked his way into being this elite type of player, whereas Vernon, it was apparent right away.
Vernon was so even against Marcus Mariota, who was a really good downfield passer. I think Vernon showed that he was an upgrade in terms of just a pure deep ball thrower. That's something that is really striking about Vernon's just skill set, and that's something that obviously Dakota, if he wins the job, will be compared against. How would you describe his downfield ability? Not seeing the play develop, like you said, making that progression, but delivering it, 20, 30 yards downfield. I think Vernon, we can all say, is kind of the exception. He's an outlier, how good he is. But how efficient did you see Prukop being in that regard?
Well, Prukop's a very accurate passer, and his decision-making is tremendous. He rarely ever makes bad decisions. He rarely ever turns the ball over. Of his 6 intersections this season, 4 of them were in situations where he's throwing a deep ball at the end of the half, or he's taking a shot to try to cut a 2-score game to a 1-score game. He very rarely makes a crucial, poor decision. But in terms of his deep ball ability, it's not as good as Vernon's. But again, like I said, his work ethic is so tremendous, and he is so self-aware just in terms of what he needs to improve on, that I would not be surprised if he really goes to work on that in the offseason and really improves in that area. But I also think that he will definitely benefit so much from having so much better talent around him. Montana State, they were tremendous offensively this year, but most of that was because they had probably two NFL guys on the offensive line, and they had Prukop. But besides that, the skill guys around him were not that great. So it was kind of hard to evaluate because a lot of times they have a couple of guys that could get deep, but they're one-dimensional players, and everybody in the league knew that. And all the rest of their skill players they're a step slow, basically. So to evaluate him on that aspect, a little bit tough. But like I said, he's not close to Vernon in terms of being able to throw the deep ball yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's an aspect of his game he really works heavily on in the offseason.
Obviously, this is going to be a much different situation than a year ago with Vernon when, I'm pretty much, everyone was waiting to hear whether or not he passed the math test or not. It was kind of a complete circus, but obviously there's going to be a much bigger spotlight on him than he's ever had before, especially since this is the second year in a row that Oregon's been doing this thing. How has he handled kind of that aspect of it? How do you think he's going to handle just kind of the media attention?
I think he'll do perfectly fine. He's one of the most mature kids I've dealt with, and he absolutely loves this. And he has a great self-awareness while also having a great self-belief without having too much arrogance. If that makes sense, he knows that he has known all along that he could get to this point, but he also knows that it's taken a tremendous amount of hard work. But he's a football junkie. His grandfather coached at Arizona State. His dad coached at USC. The reason that they moved from California to Texas was because his dad started a recruiting video making company. So his dad's been a high school coach. He's been around the game a ton. He really loves the game. And so all those sorts of things, he doesn't really get distracted by the noise. And he will be in the spotlight. And I know that this last week, just with how much pressure was being put on him and how he was getting pulled on all different angles, all of us were calling him, and Jim Harbaugh and Nick Saban and Lane Kiffin and Mark Helfrich are all calling him as well. So I know that was a little bit stressful on him, but I do think he'll be able to handle it. He's a lot different of a kid than Vernon. I know Vernon really well too. I played golf with him at a summer tournament 2 years in a row when he was at Eastern, and got to know him like that. But they're much different kids. Vernon is a very outgoing, kind of happy-go-lucky guy. He likes to be social. He likes to go out. He really likes the spotlight. I know that he really liked all the attention he got when he made this transfer. Whereas Dakota, it's not about the attention. It's not about the limelight for him. It's just about him maximizing his greatness. He does have a great self-belief. He is very confident in himself, and a lot of times that comes off as him being brash and maybe somewhat cocky. But I think he'll do just fine in terms of handling all the pressure, all the spotlight, and all that, because he really is a mature kid. He's been around this for a really long time.
Last year, when Vernon made the jump in February, I'm not sure how much contact you had with Montana State players or just Big Sky players in general in like the weeks or months afterward, but was there a vibe when he made that leap, which was kind of unprecedented at the time, to transfer up and be a starter in a Power 5 conference, essentially a starter? Were people talking about that? And did you kind of sense that maybe at that time, last spring, that other guys might be trying to think about kind of using their last year of eligibility like this?
Well, I know that Dakota will tell you that he has been planning this, not this specific thing, but he's been planning to at least leave his options open since he was a sophomore in high school. Like I said, he's a really high academic achiever. He started taking AP classes when he was just a youngster, so he accelerated his academic curve all along. But I know that coming into this last year, he knew that if he took a couple extra classes in the summer and then a couple extra classes in the fall, that he would basically be free. And I know that with a lot of the uncertainty that was going on in Montana State and kind of the step back that they took as a program, that was something that was appealing to him. But just in terms of the rest of the league, and specifically players here at Montana State, but across the Big Sky as well, I don't think anyone was surprised when Vernon made the jump because he was such an elite level player. I mean, the guy threw like 100 touchdowns in 2 years in the Big Sky, so his production level was off the charts, some of the best maybe in the history of college football. And so I don't think anyone was surprised by that. But I don't know if this gives illusions to a lot of other people But there is a couple interesting cases, and I think that just the way the college football, not to go on a tangent, but the way college football is fractured now, just with so little big-time programs in the Western United States, basically it's the Pac-12, the Mountain West, and the Big Sky. So I think that this could become more prevalent overall, just because there is a lot of times that kids slip through the cracks, and there's a lot of times that kids like Dakota Prukop. I mean, he was not a Pac-12 player when he was a senior in high school, but now he's a Pac-12 player when he's about to be a senior in college. So I think that development factor, that could definitely open some doors. But just in terms of maybe this putting that carrot out there for a whole bunch of other guys, I don't really know how prevalent that is. I don't really know. I mean, like I said, a lot of people were not surprised by this, but I don't know if this definitely gives an illusion to anyone else in the league that they might be able to do this as well.
Do you think this changes at all how FCS coaches go about either recruiting or bringing kids into their program? Because kind of the whole, what kind of separates the elite programs from the average ones is being able to kind of find those kids that slip through the cracks. But at some point, you don't want to keep finding kids that are going to keep getting scooped up by FBS teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can get elite talent, you go ahead and get them, and if he goes ahead and moves on, so be it. But I will say this, both Vernon Adams and Dakota Prukop have both been incredibly productive players in the Big Sky. But Vernon Adams' career ended in the quarterfinals with a blowout loss to Illinois State at home, and Dakota Prukop's career ended with a 5-6 record and a 10th place finish in the Big Sky Conference. So just in terms of these guys moving on and leaving, where do they leave their programs? I don't think it necessarily decimates the program that much. I mean, you saw Eastern take a slight step back this year without Vernon, and they missed the playoffs for the first time in 4 years. But most of that was because they had a senior-laden offensive line. 4 of those 5 guys got hurt, and that put them in a pretty tough spot, combined with the fact that they were playing a whole bunch of young guys defensively. So I don't know how much of it was actually Vernon. I mean, the guy who took over for Vernon led the country in passing for about 10 weeks before he suffered an injury as well. So, and then here at Montana State, Prukop individually fantastic. I mean, you look at all the yards, all the touchdowns, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, he was 9-7 in the Big Sky as a starter. I mean, he was 10-10 against Division I opponents. So, does it really thwart your program? I don't really know, and I don't think that programs will hesitate to take guys. I mean, you look at, I think of Northern Arizona is a good example right now. They swooped in and got a kid from Ventura Junior College named Case Cookus, who was a gray shirt there, and they got him in, and he basically is a true freshman who has 4 to play 4. Well, he goes out. This kid probably would have been a Pac-12 or a Big 12 player, but because he was able to enroll early at Northern Arizona and win the starting job early on, he's going to be there for a couple of years. But he's another kid that I look at. I mean, he's grown 3 inches since high school. He's a little bit of a late bloomer. For his freshman year, he went out and threw 37 touchdown passes. And I think that if you were to tell Jerome Sowers and Tim Plow and those guys down there at Flagstaff, all right, you're going to get 3 years of Case Cookus, and then maybe his 4th year he's going to be looking for a transfer. I think you take it either way. So, like I said, I don't know how much it actually decimates your program when these guys do move on, but the fact that you can get them in there, it definitely is a huge deal. I think you continue to go for these big time guys, even if there is a chance of them moving on.
Because I mean, the Bobcats couldn't beat the Grizz with Prukop, so I guess they're just SOL, right?
Right. I mean, exactly. Prukop. That was the other thing that happened. Prukop was so dynamite for the first 9 games of the year, each of his 2 years as a starter. But then the amount he ran and the amount he put on his shoulders, it started to wear him out. He sprained his PCL against Portland State and then missed the last 2 starts of the regular season in 2014. So he didn't play in Cactus his first year as a starter. And then this year, I can't even begin to start with what happened. I mean, in Southern Utah, he sprained his neck, he busted up his ribs, he rolled his ankle, he re-hurt his knee. I mean, he had all sorts of injuries just from one game, and then down the stretch, he was just a shell of himself, was not able to run. So that's the other big concern here with him transitioning to Pac-12. Can he stay healthy? But, like you said, I mean, I get Prukop a great individual talent, and I think when you surround him with more talent around him, he'll be a fantastic player, especially in that system at Oregon. But just in terms of his overall team success, you can't really point to maybe even a signature win. I mean, they had a couple really good a couple really explosive games, I should say, in 2014 when they went to California. They scored 59 against Sac State and 77 against UC Davis. But in terms of beating a premier Big Sky team, he was 0-2 against Eastern Washington. He was 0-1 against Montana. He didn't start against Idaho State 2 years ago when they were pretty good. He's 0-1 against Northern Arizona. He's 0-1 against Portland State. So, like I said, his talent definitely did not translate into big-time wins here at Montana State.
I think that's one of the interesting things because part of the allure to Vernon Adams was the win over Oregon State and almost beating Washington. I think that's kind of where everyone kind of knew him from.
Yeah. When it comes to you talk about staying healthy, that sounds familiar to us with Vernon and his broken finger saga. Hey, can we get a definitive ruling? Is it Prukop or is it Prukop? How do you pronounce the last name?
Prukop.
Okay. We've endured, a Mariota debate here over the years. Mariota is the way to go, but
I think I still say it wrong half the time as it is.
I feel like we just need to inform the public. It's Prukop. Okay. I feel good about this.
Prukop, yep.
I almost feel like Eastern and Montana State can almost use this as a chip to use during the recruiting process of being like, hey, come to us and we can almost develop you into. I mean, if you put the cards on the table, if Prukop does well next year for the Ducks, and let's say they're 6 or 7-0 going into that final stretch of the season, there's a legit. I mean, and this is completely just projecting stuff, but he's potentially put himself in the conversation to be in the Heisman race if the Ducks do what they potentially can do, and he kind of maybe mimics or still does something that Vernon did this year. I mean, it's a pretty kind of tantalizing thing to be able to say, hey, we could potentially turn you into something like this.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I wonder how they're going to use that down the road. But I definitely think that Dakota could definitely put himself in that position too. Again, like I said, he's such a system player, and again, too, we've been harping on his success or lack thereof, just in the team aspect of this. But I think that one thing that has to be revisited is Montana State averaged 43 points per game this year. They averaged 530 yards of offense. They were top 2 offensive teams in the entire country. And I was going through the stats the other day. They're the first team in at least 15 years to average more than 42 points per game and finish with a losing record. So that shows you kind of the magnitude or lack thereof of their defense. So I think that that's one thing that really needs to be emphasized here when you're talking about Prukop's success at Montana State, as well as why he probably wanted to leave. That was one comment that he gave me the day that he declared that he was going to explore his options. Was he said, I consider myself a good athlete, and I love to work hard, and I want to maximize my abilities. And he said, sometimes in a team sport, it doesn't work out like that. And I think that's one of the main reasons why he wanted to leave. I think he wanted to be surrounded by guys that share his similar passion and his similar work ethic, and I think he wanted to maybe not have to bear the weight of everything. I mean, Portland State is a great example of just their struggles this year. I mean, they go out and score 45 points, and Prukop throws for over 300 yards and rushes for over 120, and they still lose by 17 points. So, how much more can the kid do? I mean, Eastern Washington, he throws for over 300 and rushes for almost 200. They still lose 55-50. So, I mean, these guys, I think they scored something like more than 40 points a dozen or more times in his tenure as the starter, and they were probably 500 in those games because they were so poor defensively. So I think that has to really be accounted for in just kind of what he did here at Montana State.
Well, I think he'll really enjoy playing for Oregon's defense then.
How much of his development do you put on Tim Cramsey too, and his offensive coordinator, who a lot of people think should be a candidate for Oregon's quarterbacks coach job? I don't get a sense that they are hot on Cramsey's case at this point. The Oregon is. I know that there's some interest mutual, but nonetheless, people really like him and think he's an up and comer. What did he do for a guy like Prukop that they worked so well together?
Well, they played the Prukop situation just in terms of cultivating his talent and keeping him hungry. They played it about as well as you could play it, because when Prukop signed here in 2012, Montana State had an entrenched starter in Denarius McGee, who at the time was two-time reigning Big Sky Conference MVP. And so Dakota comes in 2012, he redshirts, and watches Daenerys win his second straight MVP and win the Big Sky title. And then Dakota's redshirt freshman year, his second season, 2013, that was actually Daenerys' senior season. And that season didn't go how Montana State wanted. They lost 3 games down the stretch to miss their 4th straight league title because Daenerys basically got hurt, and that was a big thing. But coming out of that season, Jake Bleskin had been Daenerys McGee's backup, and they played Jake Bleskin and Dakota off of each other in every aspect you possibly could. They made him battle for the backup job all offseason going into the 2013 season. They gave the backup job to Jake to intentionally motivate Dakota. Then in spring ball, they basically pitted those two against each other, and they used the media kind of as a pawn. And every single time obviously it was a huge analysis point for the local media here in Bozeman because McGee was such an iconic player at Montana State and a 4-year starter. And so it was the first quarterback battle in a long time for the Bobcats, and so that was kind of the thing that was underneath the most scrutiny. And so every single guy in the media was doing a story on the quarterback pretty much every day. And Rob Ash and Kim Cramsey would basically say, "Yeah, they're neck and neck, but Bleskin's a little bit ahead. Bleskin's a little bit ahead." And when it all came to fruition, and Dakota was named the starter then before 2014, it kind of all made sense. They were doing this on purpose to try to motivate Dakota because he's not your typical quarterback who just wants to throw and watch film. He does do all that kind of stuff, but he also works out like a linebacker or like a receiver. I mean, he does full-fledged conditioning. He does full-fledged workouts in the weight room, all that kind of stuff. So they were basically trying to motivate him the entire time, and I thought that was a really brilliant move because then all of a sudden, boom, now he's the starter. He doesn't have any entitlement behind it. He's had to work for it the entire time, and then they kind of just unleashed him on the league. So I think a lot of that is a credit to Cramsey. Cramsey is a fantastic motivator if you have his personality type. He's a really competitive go-getter. He's a no-nonsense type of guy, and his relationship with Dakota was pretty special. They were able to play off each other, but they were both such alpha dogs, and they both had such a high level to compete. I think a lot of people had a hard time relating to those two, and maybe that's why a lot of the guys on the Bobcats got left behind a little bit. So I think Cramsey is a great coach. I don't know if he fits in there or not, but he does have a little bit of an Oregon tie. He comes from the Chip Kelly coaching tree. He played for Chip Kelly at New Hampshire, and he coached for Chip Kelly in his younger days as a coach there before Chip came across the country to be the OC in Oregon. So there are some ties there. There are some similarities in the system. He does have a good relationship with Dakota. I'm just not sure if he's quite the fit there yet or not.
Sure. Well, Cramsey, obviously, he's kind of hard when you're around Oregon football to kind of look at him and think, why wouldn't he fit? But he seems to fit every kind of profile you would want in terms of developing a quarterback. Like you said, he was fairly raw to putting up just these gaudy numbers. It's interesting, and Dakota had indicated early on that he wanted, I think this was to Fox Sports, he said that he would ideally like to play for Cramsey again. Not sure if he'll get that chance at Oregon, but nonetheless, Dakota has put himself in a pretty good and enviable position at the very least.
Yeah, Dakota's not the only quarterback that Cramsey had a hand in developing. He was an assistant at New Hampshire when Ricky Santos won the Walter Payton Award, and he also helped develop Kevin Decker, who was an All-American quarterback there in his final years as the offensive coordinator, Cramsey that is. And so he's had some pretty successful guys. Actually, funny small world story, Cramsey was at Florida International for a year on Mario Cristobal's staff, and those guys had a verbal commitment from Nick Marshall, who ended up going and playing quarterback at Auburn. But the only two offers from Nick Marshall at the time were Florida International and Arkansas State. Gus Malzahn gets the Auburn job. He steals Nick Marshall, takes him to Auburn. The rest is history. They make a run at the national championship game. But if the pawns play out in a different way, Nick Marshall falls to Florida International, maybe those guys don't get fired after 1 year at FIU. Maybe Cramsey never comes to Montana State. Maybe Dakota Prukop is never the quarterback he becomes, and maybe he's not transferring to Oregon. So it's funny how all those sorts of things kind of work out sometimes.
Love those what-if counterfactuals.
Last thing quickly, Colter. I think it was yesterday. I think Southern Utah's coach kind of was grumbling a bit about the graduate transfer rule, and I know Eastern Washington's coach last year wasn't exceptionally happy about it. From the most part, it seems like the players are obviously on board with this. I know some of the Montana State players have been very supportive of Prukop, but kind of what's as someone that's kind of in the middle of all that, what's your opinion on kind of the coaches' one of the criticisms with them is, they can leave whenever they want, but the players can't. Just where do you kind of fall on that?
Well, like I said earlier too, I think that the quickest kid in Northern Arizona is a great example. And I think that when you're Bo Baldwin like last year, you're losing Vernon. In the immediate moment, you're obviously going to be frustrated. I know Rob Ash, Montana State's former coach, he was very vocal when Vernon transferred as well about this rule, trying to talk. I mean, he went on a national platform, he interviewed ESPN, and he interviewed Andy Staples at Sports Illustrated, and he basically used it as a to try to preach that he didn't like this rule and that something needed to be done to change this. But I think that when you're, like I said, the Northern Arizona is a great example because I think when you're at the beginning of it, if you were to say, hey, you have this kid who just led this country in touchdowns as a freshman, and you're going to get him for 2 more years, but then he might transfer, I think you'd take it. When you're in the end part of it, you probably are not going to like the rule. But just in terms of my opinion, and I think probably the opinion of a lot of people, is just that the FCS, especially the Big Sky, is so ripe with transfers anyway. So if you can bring in drop downs, why can't some of your kids maybe transfer the best opportunity for them? And on the flip side of that too, you get kids that are talented enough and are going to work hard enough to provide this opportunity for themselves. Why would you not want a kid like that? So I know Ed Lamb was pretty vocal about not liking that, Southern Utah's head coach. But on the flip side, I would argue with Ed that he just won a Big Sky title with a bunch of guys who signed with him in 2008 and then went on a variety of missions and yada, yada, yada. I mean, he has a quarterback who played at Southern Utah, transferred to BYU, and transferred back to Southern Utah. So, I mean, the transfer thing is a pretty influx thing, especially when you're talking about the Big Sky. So I'm not sure that these coaches have much to complain about. And like I said, I think if you were to present this to them early on in the process, they'd take it. When it's coming down to it at the end of the process, they're obviously not going to be happy. But I think you take a kid that has that level of talent every day of the week.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously several Oregon players have dropped down over the years. You had the Justin Roper experiment at at Montana that didn't go quite as well as I think Grizz fans would have hoped for. But shoot, thanks a ton, Colter. Really appreciate the insights. And once again, that's SkylineSportsMT.com. And what's your Twitter handle, Colter?
At SkylineSportsMT or at Bobcat_beat. Either one works.
Well, awesome, man. Well, if Montana State ever hawks another player over to the Ducks, you'll be the first person we give a call to.
Hey, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.